To order. First thing at the approval of minutes, March 2nd, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Priscilla?
Second.
Okay, how are you?
Good.
Good. All right. So any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, public comment. Any public comments out there? Okay.
Joanne.
Joanne?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yes.
I saw that item 8 on the agenda is the COG, so I was hoping if I asked you a couple questions now, you might address it when you get to that section. One of the things coming up with the COG will be the new executive director's appointment. And you have been very passionate lately, Gordon, about the benefits of the COG to our community. And so I've been looking at what a cost benefit analysis might look like. And so some of the questions would, of course, involve what the intended compensation might be for the new executive director. And I know that you are a member of the board of directors of COG. So I know you'll be voting on these issues and probably very familiar with them. So we could talk a little bit about what that is, because we're looking at some of the submissions by COG to the Office of Policy and Management in Hartford. And it seems like on the state grants, I was looking at one for 1 year, where $1.4 million in state grants moved through the COG. And they showed a personnel cost on that, or a commission, I think it's called, of $499,874. Now, is that money, nearly $500,000, that commission paid to the 3 employees of the COG? There's only 4, but one of them is on salary, the secretary. The other 3, do they divide that money? And of course, that doesn't include the commissions that they'd receive on, other kinds of state grants, like STEEP or Department of Housing or small cities. And we know the federal grant cap is 5% commission, but is that 33% commission on state grants? Is that accurate? So whatever you could do to clarify the cost, and also maybe what is the total amount of money that Cornwall pays the COG in a year? And I think this would really help all of us to better balance the benefits.
Okay, but we can come to some of that when we get down to number 7. Okay, any other public comments? Okay. Next, we have communications. Are there any communications from the board?
Not for me.
Not from me.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I did hear from the Commissioner of Environmental Protection and Energy, who was very glad that Cornwall had joined the Sustainable Materials Coalition to work on reducing solid waste generation in the town and the state. I also sat in on a Zoom meeting this morning, which was the meeting for the MIRA, which is the cooperative organization of which we send our solid waste to Hartford to the incinerator. And that incinerator is old, as we know, and is having issues quickly. So the price of getting rid of our garbage is going up quite a bit. So anyway, we'll put that on as a future agenda item. But right now, the current strategy is to ship a lot of our garbage from Connecticut to Ohio and Virginia by truck, which is incredibly expensive, environmentally polluting, and a bunch of other problems. So again, the commissioner was on that call, as were a lot of other municipal officials, but it is a recurring issue out there, and we'll put that on maybe next month as a agenda item to stay on top of that, because clearly that issue is not going to go away anytime soon. Any other communications? Let's see. Additions to the agenda, I would like to put Zoom meetings on the front of our agenda there. So anyway, is there a second to add that?
I second.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second thing is Eversource emergency response plan. I'll give you a brief update about that. Doing winter storms and summer storms. So is there a motion? I'll make a motion to do add Eversource update on that.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So Zoom meetings, these Zoom meetings for the town have become increasingly popular. And it has been hard for people that have been trying to run a meeting and conduct the meeting as well as do the Zoom aspect of that, as far as is handling people's input and making sure everybody that's trying to sign in gets signed in. I am very thankful that I don't have to do that kind of technical assistant, and very thankful, as I think we all are, to have Jonathan in the office. I know he did assist Karen Nelson, the land use official, with her meeting last week, and it certainly helped. And we do have a bunch of other special meetings coming up. And when we interviewed Jonathan, we were not in COVID. We didn't even know what Zoom was. And he's certainly done a lot to do this. So I've talked to him, and it makes it much easier for the person trying to run the meeting to have that kind of assistance. So I would like to make a motion that we pay Jonathan $50 a meeting for any special meetings that aren't the Board of Selectmen, to coordinate the Zoom thing, because in reality also he's helping other town officials do these meetings. If they're not, hugely attended, he's a great resource, and I think that amount is agreeable to him. And I think it's for the foreseeable future we'll be doing this. This allows, I think, in some ways, in many ways, it eases citizen participation in the process and things. And again, it just makes it easier for the people trying to run the meeting to be able to run the meeting without trying to do the technical work at the same time. So I would make a motion that we give John $50 for meeting for extra duty.
Second.
Second.
Yes, I agree.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
I,
Aye. And thanks again, John.
Jonathan.
Yeah, so Eversource, we're working on updating the procedures from ever since this storm last summer with Diane Abibi, our emergency management director. They have an emergency response plan now. They have one before, but hopefully this is updated. And one of the things that we signed off on was a critical facilities unit, and we added Bonnie Brook, the senior housing in Cornwall Bridge, to our list of town hall, firehouses, shelters, schools, municipal buildings, garage, that kind of thing. So again, I think that's an important issue when it comes up. And again, just to let people know, Eversource is doing some work on that, and we're working with them to try to make sure we have better emergency restoration as time goes on. Uh, Anything else on that? Just a lot of things going on. We are next on our regular agenda items. COVID-19 again is still with us. I think we as a state and hopefully as a country are beginning to turn the corner on that. We are seeing increased vaccinations throughout the region. We are seeing some of the reported rates of infection go down. The test rate, though, for the state went up today. So it's up, things go up, it was almost 5%, it had been 2-3%. But especially out in this area, Litchfield County, we're seeing some real improvement in the hospitalizations and things which we've all been working towards for the last year. So that's encouraging. I did hear from Jen Markow today that Sharon Hospital is going to resume vaccinations for residents in Region 1. And so that should happen soon. So again, more places are opening up. The governor is optimistic about getting more vaccines into the state. And if anything, the schedule is running ahead slightly. It can be still frustrating at the individual level to chase the vaccines a little bit. But again, if people are persistent, there are places that are available. And again, we put out a COVID newsletter. We're going to update that again this week, as we have been doing, so that people will stay tuned and be able to hear the latest information about where vaccinations are available. We are aware that through our congressional delegation that the town and school will be receiving some funding from the federal government as part of the COVID relief package. The town is roughly over $100,000. The school's about $20,000. The school has also received other assistance for that, and that has helped them budget with their budget with some of the expenditures they've had to do to meet the COVID requirements. And again, the town's funds will be used, can only be used for COVID related expenditures. They can't be used just to drop the mill rate because we're good people. So again, at least that money is available, and we have had some outlay which will be reimbursed, and Barbara Herbst, our financial officer, has been keeping track of those things. One thing that's coming up that we'll need a decision on, that I'm working again with Diane and the UCC on, is trying to figure out Memorial Day for the year. It's a very important day for the town. To me, it's one of the most important observances we have. It's one of the best, but unfortunately, it attracts big crowds for Cornwall at this time. I don't feel we will probably go ahead with the traditional Memorial Day observances. We're looking to do some, definitely have some observances, but not the full parade and carnival that we normally have. So we'll have a report for you on that for next time. I also thought of, it might be, again, a opportunity to work with our representatives in Washington. I know we're going to put out a thing. There is going to be increased efforts to reach out to veterans to make sure they're getting proper care. And so we're going to put out maybe a special Veterans Day flyer to people, and especially to our veterans. The other thought I had, I know people in Congress can help families get service members medals if people have served, but they do not have the medals that they've earned. That can be, they can be acquired by doing some paperwork with our congressional representatives. So that might be a nice thing to do for veterans if they want to do that. So again, we're going to get some details about that. The Park and Rec is planning to have a baseball season this spring. So they're not doing organized sports at the school, but there is going to be a Park and Rec baseball program, which I think is good. And again, I think people know now how to do things using the CDC guidelines. And again, I think it's very important to try to do as much as we can. And again, the school has been great in their success in having programs that have been done responsibly and enabled us to get a full year of academics in. So I think the kids have really been a big part of that. So we'll carry that on to the playing fields and keep on cautiously reopening and getting, being able to do things that everybody enjoys. Anything else on COVID, townwide celebrations, anything else that we have mentioned there?
That all sounds good.
Yep. Okay. We're all looking forward to spring, I think.
Yeah.
In spring, on April 23rd, we are going to have a big town meeting. That's gonna be on Friday night. We're gonna have 4 items on the call. One is reviewing last year's annual report. Second is adopting the 5-year capital plan. Third is looking at transferring the former West Cornwall Firehouse lot to William Betts, who owns the old bookstore in West Cornwall. The Planning and Zoning Commission did give that their approval last week. And so that's on the agenda. And the final thing is consolidating the Sidney K Fund into the town endowment. And following that, we will have our annual budget hearing. So it will be a busy night. And again, if people want to participate, you will be notified through the selectman's office of the Zoom link. I think most of this is going to be, virtual the way we're doing this. We're going to talk to our neighboring towns to see how they voted on the necessary voting items, but other towns have done similar things, and it's been successful in the last couple of months. So we're on track with that. I did talk to Attorney Grimes, the town attorney, and he is working up the call to a couple of those items. It's interesting because as we're doing our thing, the state legislature is also this week debating extending the governor's emergency powers. I think he's put out about 80 emergency orders, which do covers things like how do you vote in town elections and town votes. So we are waiting to hear how that plays out, but we'll have a call to sign at our next meeting on April 6th ahead of that town meeting. And we do have notices going out into the Chronicle, so people will know that meeting, how to access that meeting. So we'll have something to sign off at our next meeting on that. And we'll get that all publicized. Any thoughts on that event?
Sounds good.
Should be interesting evening. Also interesting is the West Cornwall Wastewater management program. Again, I sent the board out the explanatory text, which was compiled by Lisa Samant of the Board of Finance and Barbara Herbst, our financial officer. And I think it's really good. Sort of 2 pages without telling people how to vote. It sort of lays out the reasoning behind doing the project. And the next step would be to send that explanatory text to the town bond council, and then he will run it past state officials to make sure it falls within the state guidelines as far as what towns are supposed to put out for as far as information for voters ahead of the votes. So I would make a motion to send this explanatory text to Attorney Joseph Fozzie, who's the town bond counsel. Is there a second to that?
I second.
All those in favor?
Right?
Aye. One thing I did mention was a time schedule at the last advisory committee meeting last week of having a time schedule so people know well ahead of time when meetings will happen about this important issue. The tentative schedule at this point is to have a informational meeting, which will probably be a virtual, in-person and hybrid meeting. So that would happen on the 11th of June, which is a Friday, and then have a town meeting on July 10th, which is a Saturday, which would automatically adjourn to a referendum vote on the 24th of July, 2 weeks later. And by doing this, as we said last time, ahead of time, by giving the town clerk plenty of time to notice this, it will facilitate absentee ballots for people that will not be able to vote in person due to illness or absence. So I would like to make a motion to adopt those tentative dates. And again, we have some time to change them, but that again we have a fairly tight time schedule as far as we have to work around the 4th of July holidays. And there's a statutory requirement that links the town meeting and the referendum vote. So again, we wanted to get that done in a way that would publicize the events, give some time in between the informational meeting and the town meeting. There won't be a vote at the town meeting, but it gives about a month in between in case there are questions or clarifications that come up at the informational meeting in June. We can get those answers by the time of the town meeting in July, which would then be 2 weeks before the referendum vote. So again, we got a 6-week process there. And again, we have to get this in the Chronicle and make sure there's plenty of notice informally as well as legally to make sure people know what's going on. So I'd make a motion to set those dates tentatively. And again, we would sign off on town meeting calls and things closer to the time, but at least this gets a time schedule that we can publicize. Is there a second for discussion of the
I second.
second? Okay. So again, we're talking about having an informational meeting, which will be similar to this, although there may be some in-person ability there too, if people want to go to a meeting space like the school and socially distance. We're gonna have to work out some of that, how that would work. But we also want to allow people that don't feel comfortable in attending a large gathering at this point to be able to attend. So again, I have confidence we'll be able to work out something. So we do an informational meeting, lay out some of the information, most of the information, all the information to date on that, June 11th. And then we would then a month later on July 10th have a town meeting, which again would discuss and debate the item about spending up to $5 million for a waste management system for West Cornwall, with the thought of having at least 45% reimbursed with a USDA grant. And then people would vote on that proposal on the 24th, which is a Saturday. So those town meeting and the referendum would be on Saturdays. So anyway, sound good to people, the board? Okay, so all those in favor of adopting that tentative schedule, say aye.
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 Aye,
Aye.
good. So while we're on a roll, I did get a nice letter from my friend Congresswoman Johanna Hayes today that said, as part of the next major piece of federal legislation, which is an infrastructure program, each congressional district is able to sponsor infrastructure programs for their districts. So that includes roads, bridges, and sewer plants. So interesting timing. And I know Congresswoman Hayes, as well as I think at least some of this, I think the Lieutenant Governor has been to West Cornwall and has heard the pitch. So again, I plan to push to have the West Cornwall wastewater system be nominated as an eligible program. We're at that point. I'm not sure how that affects the timing, but I'll be able to tell you more at our next meeting. But again, if we can get more than 45% paid for through an infrastructure grant, I'd be all in favor of that. Most of these bridge programs and sewer plants do have state or federal funding attached to them. So it's not necessarily an either or situation. But anyway, I feel that we should pursue that, because whatever we can do to offset the capital expense, we should do. Agreed?
Agreed.
Great. All right. So anyway, we will be working on that initiative with our federal representatives. Let's see. Anything else on West Cornwall? Again, we're going to go to the Board of Finance probably this week and get their approval of the process, or maybe it will be next time, but we've been in constant communication with the Board of Finance about the project. So we will be working with them on that. Next, April road work. We do have money in this year's budget for road work for spring resurfacing. Jim did get a quote from Seymour Sealing, who we used in the past. And they have come up with a quote for us, which is they were awarded the state contract for doing this work, because we're using a heavier, more substantial oil. We have to get all the work done by May 1st because of DEP regulation by May 1st. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. We've had very good luck with Seymour Sealing their products before, their care, and whatever stone we don't use, we pick up and use next year. We've gone from using sand seal to stone seal because we feel it puts out a better seal, a more thorough resurface, and there's less dust with the stone in the spring than the old days of having the dusty sand roads in the summer. So what Jim recommended was we have a proposal here for $192,000. He thought if we took out Papa Swamp, because there's some work that needs to be done to prepare that for resurfacing, we do that next year. We would do quite a few of these roads in Cornwall Bridge area. We have Allen Road, which is on the top of Mohawk Mountain going into Goshen. And we have Music Mountain and Cream Hill on the very backside, the very northern part of Cream Hill. So that would get all those roads resurfaced. We'd be doing approximately 8 miles of road for about $150,000. So I'd make a motion that we accept Seymour's proposal. They'd be doing this work in the end of April. So again, we're putting something in the Chronicle to tell people that we are resurfacing these roads this month. So is there a second to that recommendation?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? Yeah, so all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I think overall the roads held up pretty well this winter, especially the paved roads. Still working on some of the dirt roads as frost is still hanging in there in certain parts, but soon, probably the next 2 weeks, we'll get on to doing a real grading of the roads. We have been hauling quite a bit of stone up to Flat Rocks, and then we'll get on to grading it and shaping them up. So those are our big projects for April. So anyway, and hopefully we won't have any more of the white stuff coming down. Let's see. So I think that's it for our road work budgets. One thing that was out there we hadn't talked about, we got a late request from HVA for an increased budget amount. If you get your draft budgets, we have we've given the last several years $1,200. They've requested an increase of $1,500. They have done increasing work for the town, and primarily they oversee a conservation easement at the town beach. So we've worked on them and revised that to give the town a little more flexibility for the use of the town beach, Hammond Beach. And importantly, they have a river information and outreach program which monitors river use, especially by visitors, environmental deterioration, and user group conflicts. So anyway, they're active along the riverbanks. I know it was very busy summer last year, but they were very proactive with their interns. So that was very helpful. And again, they helped us maintain our river access in West Cornwall, monitored the trash there, and invasive species. So again, and the other thing they've done is they've done some mapping for our land use groups. So again, we want to try to keep our budget down. So I'm inclined to increase their budget by $1,000 to $1,250. It's not their full request, but it is 4 times more than they're getting now. So I thought of doing that, and I thought of another group that requested a major increase was the Cornwall Conservation Commission. We did reduce them somewhat last month. We reduced it from their request of $4,500 down to $3,500. Currently, they have a budget line of $1,500. I think we could take the $1,000 from HVA out of that because, as we identified, one of the key things the Conservation Commission is doing lake monitoring, water quality testing on Cream Hill Lake, and there's already an activity fund with $800 sitting in it, which should cover a lot of the expenses for the year. with that, so there's extra funds available. So, and again, some of the things they wanted was $1,400 for horizon map planning, which would do ridge line mapping. Again, the Planning and Zoning Commission is doing a lot of reformatting of the town regulations and revisiting the town plan. And I would like the conservation group to coordinate their work with that. I know they've got a pretty full agenda at this time. So I would make a motion that we increase the HVA appropriation from $250 to $1,250 and reduce the Cornwall Conservation Commission allocation to $2,560. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Want to take a minute to look through your budget drafts to catch up with all that?
It's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's all on page 4 of our things here. The lines are Housatonic Valley Association is 125 and the Cornwall Conservation Commission is 127. As we said before, last year budget, the Housatonic Valley Association was 250. That would go up to 1250. And the Conservation Commission was 1,500. That would go up to 2,560. So both get increased. And again, I do appreciate the work of both groups and especially HVA helping us monitor the river and the access points. It was a big help last year, and I anticipate it's going to be busy again this year. So any more discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will write both organizations saying we did not grant their full request, but we did increase them. Okay. Anything else on budgets? One thing we haven't wrestled with that we need to wrestle with soon is cybersecurity insurance. And I will have that as an agenda item for next time. We do have a Board of Finance meeting this Thursday night at 7 o'clock. The Board of Ed presented their budget last week. The local school did a good job because, as we said before, they got some grants that helped them offset some of the COVID expenses, but they have had an increase in enrollment. I think now they're up to 113 kids. And I think their budget increase proposal was something like 1.7%. They did drop a bus because there's more parents taking their kids to school these days. So again, pretty sharp pencil over there on Cream Mill Road, and I think it's they've got a good operation. And again, they've increased some of the counseling lines, which is absolutely understandable with everything going on, but have decreased a school bus they didn't need. So again, there is an increase in the regional school budget, mostly because there are more kids down to school and we have to pay a regional cost for the programs that we share with other towns. The high school number actually stayed about the same. So it's mostly doing the central office programs based on our increased census. I believe Cornwall School and Salisbury Central School are the only two that are seeing significant increases in their enrollments at the present time. So that's what I have on the budget at this point. Any other thoughts on that?
Nope, sounds good.
But it's coming together, and on Thursday night, they're going to put it together with some revenues. The state is looking at level funding us for revenues. Tax base did not increase much, as we said before. but we have had some good year for the revenues as far as tax and recovering some back tax payments. So Barbara assures us we'll be able to adopt a budget in this type of framework without major financial impact to the taxpayers. So anyway, we'll put a fine point on that starting Thursday night. Northwest Council of Government meeting report. We had an interesting meeting of a variety of speakers and topics. We started out with a mental health professional who gave us a little profile, who's spoken to us before, Greenwood's Counseling, who the town also supports. Did say that the amount of opioid overdoses did increase in 2020. Not a great surprise, but again, with a lot of the COVID emergencies, the underlying struggle that people have with addiction didn't go away. If anything, got worse because of the stress people are under. And unfortunately, that's reflected in some of those figures. But we are fortunate to have some very good organizations here that deal with those mental health issues that our social service people can refer people to. So that was one piece of news. Another thing was there is a state program called the Solar MAP, which is a Solar Municipal Assistance Program, which assists municipalities with doing solar energy projects. And again, that is something we might want to pursue. We already have solar electric at the town office and school, but we haven't done anything towards that for a long time. And we are going to re-roof the transfer station, and that pretty sunny spot there. So we might be able to put up some panels at some point, the transfer station or the salt storage shed or whatever at the highway. We have quite a bit of roof space and quite a bit of energy bill there at two places that solar can help us offset. So those are two things that came up. The next a big thing that came up was state legislation regarding housing. And there was a hearing, I believe yesterday at the Capitol, that's gathered quite a bit of interest, and that would make significant changes to state zoning regulations. There's been testimony back and forth on that, but it is interesting that has the issue of housing has generated quite a few pieces of legislation. I think people that observe housing trends in Connecticut are aware that the price of housing is very high in Connecticut, and there has been a long time flight of older and younger residents from the state, of which housing is a part of that. And I sat through a presentation last week, a recording one that said a new interesting fact was that 50% of young adults in Litchfield County, 20 to 30-year-old, are actually living with their parents, which shouldn't come as a huge surprise to anybody in Cornwall, but again shows that's a big number. And Connecticut is second only to New Jersey in that number as far as percentages of young adults living with their parents.
Wow.
So again, it shows that our problems in Cornwall aren't unique. It's going on all over the country and certainly all over the state. And so again, we are planning to have a housing forum in May to start addressing some of these things. Part of the legislation that was being provided was, for example, was talking about making an accessory apartment a by right application, not special permit application. Apparently, most towns in the state allow accessory apartments and probably half of them require special permit, half of them require can do it by right, which means you can just administratively go in for a permit the same way you can go in for a house. So anyway, I think we'll receive some interest as far as accessory apartments as being a real tool that towns can use to help diversify their housing stock, generally with making smaller houses. So that was going on. And again, other issues were brought up by members. Back to Joanne's questions. I can guess, but I'll tell you, it's only a guess, that a lot of the personnel at the Council of Governments, there are 3 planners, and there are some executive or secretarial staff also. A lot of their budget has historically come from the state in the form of a transportation grant. And the salaries of the planners are set to be competitive. So I think those state grants, a lot of them, especially the transportation grants, which are ongoing, happen every year. They've been happening for years because this is the way the state DOT gets to have contact and communication with the 21 towns and chief elected officials in Litchfield County at once, so they don't have to go out and talk to us all individually. And also, if there are DOT grants for roads and bridges, of which there are some, and we've taken advantage of some of those when we did a lot of road work in East Cornwall, they can be run through the COG with their expertise. And again, some of those have to be approved and prioritized by the 21 elected officials there. So you get to vote on restoring the North Canaan Railroad Station versus sidewalks in Washington, for example. That happened like 10 years ago. And eventually both of those projects were funded. They just happen in a sequence that enables elected officials in the town to have input on those type of projects. And again, they have their accounts are audited. And if I don't have one, I can get a audit of their last year's accounts and income. I think the biggest thing I can give you a definite answer on is that let's see, I give you a brief history because I looked it up. So in 1972, all right, let's go back a ways. So 1961, county government was abolished in the state of Connecticut. The governor at the time, I believe it was Abraham Riverkoff, who eventually wound up living in Cornwall, felt that especially Fairfield County government was becoming almost as powerful as the state of Connecticut. So they abolished county government well before all our time. But that created a vacuum because then you just had the state and you had the towns, which is pretty rare. I'm not sure there's any other state that does that, but they decided to do that, and that's still what happens here. So in the 1970s, they said, we want to have some planning functions. We need to do things like transportation or environmental issues. We need to coordinate things so we don't have 169 different plans to do things all over the state. So the state gave the towns an option of joining what is called a regional planning agency in 1972, which the town of Cornwall did, and along with the other towns in Region 1 school district, Salisbury, Falls Village, North Canaan, Kent, Sharon. The 6 of us joined with Warren, Washington, and Roxbury for reasons I don't know, but those other 3 towns are members of 2 different school districts. So we didn't, for some reason, we didn't combine with like Region 6. But anyway, so those 9 towns joined a regional planning agency in the 1970s. 1980s, the town had another town meeting, which turned the regional planning agency into a council of governments. Same 9 towns. Then I believe about 5 years ago, the state reorganized the council of governments from 9 regions into 5 or 15 into 9 or whatever it was. So anyway, we combined with Litchfield Hills, which was Eastern Litchfield County, combined with us and joined us into the 21 COG towns that we have right now, which was interesting because one of the things that was said at the time that turned out to be true was we used to pay dues, and our dues were probably triple what they are now because we joined with many more towns and didn't, the towns in Eastern Litchfield County had greater population than we did. So we were paying probably $4,000 or $5,000 a year in the previous Northwest COG, and then now we pay $1,100, $1,120 a year for COG services, which to me is incredible for the amount of expertise they give us. Rick Lynn, who is former chair of Cornwall Planning and Zoning Commission, was the longtime Litchfield Hills Council of Elected Officials executive director. He maintained that position when we merged with them. Still lives in Cornwall, still active in community things. And I probably talk to him about things once a week or so on various state issues. He'll be participating in facilitating a conversation about the Cornwall Bridge traffic issues next month on April 12th. Again, bringing some resources to the town, dealing with state agencies, and really making the voices of these small towns and cities like Torrington heard in ways we wouldn't be heard if we didn't have that organization. So I guess, Joanne, that's my only firm answer tonight is we paid $1,100 a year to be part of COG. The town could vote to not be a part of COG. We are still part of a planning district, but we do not have to be. We can withdraw from a COG, but in my mind, I don't think we'd be the only town out of 21 towns to do that. And I think it would be a terrible waste of town resources because they've been very instrumental in getting a lot of grants and other resources to the town. So that's sort of my report from the COG meeting. I know Priscilla has been very faithful and also attending the meetings. Do you have anything to say about that meeting, Priscilla? Any other COG news? Okay. All right, so not hearing anything else. Our next report is on tax refunds. John, do you have those there? You can tell us what the amounts are.
Yep, I've got them here. It's the one is $44.25 for overpayment of real estate tax. And the other one is $356.55 for overpayment of real estate tax.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we grant these 2 refund requests as recommended by our able tax collector. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the last thing on our agenda is more public comment. And anyone else out there with a comment, any Any
Joanne's
tough
got her
questions?
hands up.
Joanne's up there. Okay. Yes, Joanne.
I just would like to clarify. I thank you for addressing some of the issues I raised. I just want to be clear. So no member of the COG receives commission-based compensation, is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that.
But aren't you
So
on?
I don't
board?
want to venture an answer. They may. So the question is, do they commission from a grant? I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out the answer.
Thank you. And isn't it a bit misleading to tell us that the town of Cornwall only pays $1,100? That's our membership fee. I mean, we're certainly paying Janelle Mullen to head up the affordable housing. I mean, we're paying for services. Can you give us a total amount of money that Cornwall pays the COG for various services?
Well, we have two contracts. One, we've hired Janelle Mullen to work on our housing
Right.
plan, which is required by the state, but we also got an offsetting grant. So the $10,000 that we pay for that consultation is offset by a state housing grant. So I think that's pretty much a wash there. And we also we have put in for the last couple of years, $10,000 first to have Jocelyn Air help with developing our town plan. And then we have put in another 10,000 a year to have Janelle, who's taken over some of the implementing the new regulations and bringing in some of the action items with that. So again, that's under contract. We put that in our town capital budget. But again, we have, remember let's see, for the draft before, which was large, which was a lot of that was written by individuals. Again, Tom McGowan did that for a fairly modest fee. At one point, we did a major redraft, and whether it was a 1990 or 2000 town plan. At one point, we hired somebody. We probably spent $30,000 or $40,000 with another consultant that was not a member of the COG. And it's not uncommon for towns that do hire independent consultants to do their town plan updates to spend, $50,000 just to do the plan, let alone the work of drafting, updating the regulations. So all these fees, if anything, in my mind, are very reasonable, save us money, and again, bring us right now. These planners work in all 21 towns, so they have good, probably the best sources of information in towns that are similar to us. Each town is different in its own way, but they're facing somewhat of the same issues. So they're doing that. Plus, they're also interacting with other planners throughout the state through their council of governments contacts. So I'm absolutely satisfied with the work town gets from the COG. But those are the only two places that you could see that is our annual dues for $1,100 and our $10,000, which is implementing the town plan functions.
You mentioned also the pending legislation in Connecticut around zoning and that have been proposed by Desegregate Connecticut. I believe there are 4 bills that are that you were referring to. How do you stand on those bills?
I haven't read all 4 bills. I've read one bill, and there's some things I agreed with in them. I mean, again, I think housing is a critical issue for the town, for the towns, for the state. And there are parts of the bills that I totally agree with. There's other things in the bills that I disagree with. So again, they're
Tell us
very
what-
comprehensive, so I don't really have, I mean, and I'm not sure, I haven't really weighed in and weighed through all the pluses and minuses. I think also some places that are really wound up about it. Some parts of this legislation affect towns that are on a major transportation corridor, or also of a size that is much larger than our town. So again, a lot of the impact on this town, I didn't see that it was going to have a huge impact on this town. Let's put it this way. But I saw there was some good, because I don't know. I think there are some things that in zoning discourage housing and types of housing, and I think need to be updated in our statewide. I mean, I think Connecticut's zoned for large single-family housing. Most of the land is for that, and that's not really where the market is now. As we said before, for young people or older people, they can't afford, and they may not even want a large rambling house. So, I mean, I think we have to do a bunch of things that could be done, should be done to move us to, a more diverse housing stock.
And do you think that should be state mandated or in local control?
Again, I like to think we'll be able to make a lot of good decisions locally, but I think also some ways the state rules now stack the deck against housing varieties. So again, I would like to see some flexibility so the towns can do the right things. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other public comments? Hard
have a-
questions from the press?
I have a question. It's Carolyn.
Yes.
I was just wondering what you feel, Gordon, about the fact that I learned recently that the P&Z Commission is overhauling the entirety of Cornwall's zoning regulations. And I was just wondering how you feel about that, and also what you anticipate the cost of that will be.
I don't think there'll be a major, I mean, I think that cost will be absorbed in the $10,000 we spend on planning every year. As I said before, I was on planning and zoning before I became a selectman, and I know when we adopt regulations, we sort of tack them onto what's already there. And I wouldn't say overhaul is the right word. I think they're sort of reformatting some of the regulations to make them either more current to what's been happening in the last 40 years. And where we are right now, we're certainly in a different space than we were in the 1980s. So I think I would look at it more of an update than I would call it an overhaul. And I think we have a conscientious committee. And I think I'll say this, that even somebody that was on plans only like myself and spent a lot of times talking to people that are trying to do things in town, whether it's build a house or do other things, that sometimes our regulations can be hard to understand what's permitted and what's not permitted. So I think a fresh look to make them more user-friendly and more understandable and more modern in some ways is I think it's a good process that they're taking seriously and they're going through it. So I think it's good because again, we went through a two-year period of updating the town plan, came up with 75 things that needed to be done. I mean, major things that needed to be done. That was a deliberative process, trying to put things together in a cohesive planning document as opposed to something where we just tack on 75 Post-its on top of the existing plan. I think that we've got a wise group of people that are are doing the right thing there. So, and again, they're working hard on it. So I'm supportive of their efforts.
My concern is that in being more user-friendly, that they're oversimplifying the regulations to the point that they're not specific enough to actually protect the interests of the majority of Cornwall residents. You know, I understand creating a guide perhaps to explain the regulations, but to actually simplify the regulations to such an extent that they're overly simplistic. I personally don't think the goal of legal language should be, you know, the legal language should be as specific and clear as possible. And less words in law doesn't usually mean better. So that's my fear as I've been reading the regulations that are going to go to the public hearing on April 13th, that they are so simple without a lot of specificity that they actually have the potential to harm Cornwall quite a bit.
Well, I would disagree that they're going to harm Cornwall, but I also don't want to have a public hearing on a planning and zoning public hearing at our meeting. I think the place for that is at the planning and zoning process, and they are, you know, they're ready to go on April 13th. And again, I've been to quite a few planning and zoning hearings, which are interesting, and people are able to make statements, and then the commission will consider that. They have options, amending what they propose, tabling things, but I know they listen well. So, but I also don't want to have a hearing about their hearing at our meeting. But thank you. Any other comments? Okay, any questions from the press?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you, Ruth.
You
Okay,
too.
all right. Okay, so hearing no more statements, comments, make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
I
Aye, thank you.
thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Priscilla.
Good night, Priscilla. Good night, Maria. Good night, John. Thank you.
Good night,
Night,
Priscilla.
Jonathan. Thank you.